Produced by
Welcome to Take on the South, the podcast of the Institute for Southern Studies at the University of South Carolina. I'm Matt Simmons, the director of the Institute, and I will be your host today. Today is our fourth annual NYFR Lecture in Southern Literature, brought to us by the generous donations of the NYFR family here in Columbia, South Carolina. And we are delighted to have as our honoree this year an exciting writer, to my mind, one of the more interesting writers working in Southern Literature right now, Jamie Quatro. Jamie, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jamie is the author of 3 volumes so far. She has a volume of short stories called I Want to Show You More, which has one of the most intriguing and bizarre stories I've ever read in my life, where they're jogging with the statues on their back.
Yes.
I read that story, and I have no idea what's going on here, but I absolutely love it. Right?
Well, you're with. I have no idea what's going on in that
There
story.
There we go. She's also the author of 2 novels, 2018's Fire Sermon and 2024's Two-Step Devil, which she has right there in front of her. Two-Step Devil was how I became aware of Jamie. As I was telling her at breakfast this morning, I was literally about 13 months ago wandering through the public library, and the cover was so striking, and I picked it up and I just devoured the book, and I have been a really intrigued with all of her work since then, right? I've really, really come to appreciate that. So we're so glad to have you here with us as this year's NYFR honoree. And I want to start out with some questions. It's really simple, basic sort of stuff. Where are you from? What's your background? And, I always think of this as the Marcel question. Proust writes 5,000 pages about a fictional version of himself becoming a writer. Mm-hmm. So don't give me 5,000 pages, but how did Jamie become a writer?
Wow, where to start? Well, first, thanks for having me here. It's been really great to get to know some of your students this morning. They're so smart, and they obviously love what you're doing, especially that barbecue class.
Oh, yeah, barbecue class. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
Wish I could take that class. So I'm one of those kids who kind of always knew that someday I wanted to be a writer. My mother kept an essay I wrote in 2nd grade that just says, I love reading. It's like having an adventure without leaving my room. When I grow up, I will be a writer. And my mom put it away, so I still have that. But I did the sort of typical thing where I went to college and majored in English because I thought that was what you would do. I went to Pepperdine University.
Okay. Out in Los Angeles,
yes,
right?
I'm from Tucson, Arizona. Was raised in a denomination called the Church of Christ.
That's Stone Campbell movement?
No.
Or is this the Pentecostal movement?
It's not Pentecostal.
Okay.
It's an Anabaptist
Okay.
Sort of baptism by full immersion. It was like we called it Baptist, but without the instruments. There were no instruments in worship and no dancing, no drink. Kind of very like rules focused. But Pepperdine was a Church of Christ school, and my parents had said you can choose a Church of Christ University to get the funding that they put aside. So there was David Lipscomb in Nashville, Harding, Abilene, and Pepperdine, which I went sight unseen because it was in Malibu and on the ocean.
Why not?
So that was how I ended up there. But it was a really wonderful experience. I majored in English. I got married, and my husband and I moved to Williamsburg, Virginia, where I did my master's degree in English.
Did he go to Pepperdine as well?
He did, yes,
Fantastic.
he did. And after William and Mary, where we both did our master's degrees, we ended up moving up to Princeton, in New Jersey, where I started my doctorate in English. And all along, all of this time, I was secretly writing fiction, but I didn't feel comfortable saying out loud, I don't want to write about literature. I want to write literature. Mm-hmm. But it was what I was thinking all along. And so when I was at actually my last semester at William and Mary, I wrote a story and sent it to the Student Literary Journal, undergraduate, even though I was a grad student. And one day received 2 calls. One was from the editor of that literary journal, and she said, we loved your story, we want to publish it. The other was from Princeton University saying you're admitted with a presidential fellowship.
Fantastic.
I ran to the soccer field to tell my husband that I got a story published, and I didn't even mention that I'd gotten a fellowship to Princeton, and that should have been my first clue that the English track was wrong. So we became pregnant while I was at Princeton, and I quit the program, ABD basically. Or not even ABD.
too,
Well,
so, you know.
even less than ABD. I'd taken some courses, but it was the right thing. Had 4 children in 5 years, and it was just kind of
Fantastic.
after going from all that schooling to just being home with children. I would, when they were napping, I would just like frantically write stories. And when the youngest went to kindergarten, I decided to make it official and went to Bennington for my MFA.
Okay, great.
And graduated in 2009 and kind of signed with my agent in 2010 and sold my first book, and she sold my first book in 2011.
Fantastic. And that was I Want to Show You More, right?
That was I Want to Show You More.
Fantastic. Well, how did you end up then in Tennessee? How did you end up writing about the South then? Because
Right.
you're from the Southwest, and and then go to school in Southern California.
Yes.
And there is a way, I've been talking with some people recently, some friends of mine, that there's a sense that I have as a 12th generation Southerner, that I feel more of a kinship with Californians than I do with someone from the industrial Midwest in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just the weather. I don't know if it's the Caribbean-facing nature of the South and the Hispanic nature of Southern California. But if you want to talk about the Sun Belt or whatever, I think there is a logic to that. It's not an airtight logic, but there's a logic to that. So I guess maybe where you come from kind of extends south, as maybe you can maybe argue as an extension of South, imperfectly perhaps. But you were very much outside of South.
Yes.
How did you end up writing about this place? How did you end up coming to, you live in Tennessee now.
Yes.
How did you end up arriving there and writing about this place?
Yes. Well, so many answers to this question. Following on your weather thing, I do think there's something to the warm weather and personality types and having a kinship with people, because it is the colder climates. I noticed there's just an urge to get past and get inside for most of the year, and you kind of develop your layers, and you don't have that in the warmer climates. There's a little bit more ease, a little bit more time to chat because you're not trying to get from place to
much
place in
more
the cold.
languid
It's
as you
languid,
move, yeah.
yes. But when we moved to Chattanooga, we actually moved to Lookout Mountain.
Okay.
And we were
On
basically...
which side of the state line?
This is the question. We were on the Georgia side. So we lived in Georgia for 16 years, but our backyard abutted the Tennessee line.
Ah, yeah.
So I would go out for runs and would start on the Georgia side and then would be in Tennessee and would be back in Georgia. And as an outsider, I started noticing certain things, certain distinctives. For example, the Tennessee side was much more buttoned up with its laws. So it had leash laws. The Georgia side didn't. So I knew if a dog followed me home when I was running, which side I was on,
Wow.
Things like that. Or I would, run past a sign that said, here were hospital trenches during the Civil War. And I would ask a neighbor, there's hospital trenches right around the corner. And then he said, what are you talking about? There's no hospital. There's no trenches up here. And I think it was this thing of you notice things when you're not from an area that locals have become a little bit inured to. They don't see it anymore. Eudora Welty's parents weren't from the South, so she grew up going up to the Midwest. And when she would come back, I think it gave her eyes to see a South that was different from maybe what some people who were from there. So I wanted to explore this idea of the border and between Georgia and Tennessee, and the way that this kind of artificial border had taken on material form in various ways and where we lived. And that's where I Want to Show You More came from. But I was really nervous when I started writing these stories set there because I'd only lived there a few years. And at Bennington, one of my favorite teachers and advisors was a writer, Jill McCorkle.
Yeah, she was our honoree last year, actually.
Okay, so Ron Rash and Jill McCorkle, great company. And at one point I asked Jill, I'm not sure that I have a right to the South as a non-native person living in the South. And she said, you are raising all of your babies here. Yeah. You have as much right to this experience as anybody else does, even if you weren't raising your children here. But she gave me permission. I felt like she was a really good one to give me permission and kind of unlocked my fears. So let me say, she squelched any fears I had about being a non-Southerner. And now people just assume I am. But I think the thing that really connected me to the South and why I felt so drawn and comfortable writing about it was actually the religious aspect of having been raised Church of Christ. That felt really strange in Arizona. There was only like maybe one or two in the city. It's nothing. It was a denomination no one had heard of when I went to college, not college, but, I'd go outside New York or places they've never heard of that. Come to the South, everyone's like, oh, yeah, Church of Christ. I was raised Church of Christ. I was raised Church of Christ. And I think it's really a Tennessee born denomination. So
I know several people who were raised. Now that you mention it, because I'm also okay. There's Stone Campbell, and I'm trying to triangulate all these things together.
Yeah,
I actually know several people who were raised at. They're all Roman Catholic now, but
yes. We've definitely moved away from it as well into more liturgical and.
Yeah, I love what you said about borders and liminality.
Yeah,
this is something that in my literature classes, I just kind of fall into just over and over again, especially in the sort of South as it exists now. Because there's so much change and there's so much standardization of South.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about this whole Sun Belt thing, if that's what the South is becoming, as, everybody from California settles in Franklin, Tennessee, right? Where does South still belong then? Where is it still? Is it just in these sort of in-between places? There's a story that I often end my literature course with. It's from 2009. It's by a writer named Skip Horak from.
I know Skip.
So you know Skip.
Yeah.
He has this story called Borderlands, which is ends with this teenage boy kind of had a rough childhood, abandoned by his parents. He's trying to reconnect with his mother around Christmas, and he drives across the Central Time, Eastern Time divide on the interstate as he's driving east from east from Louisiana to Florida to try to reconnect with his mother.
Okay.
And he stops, pulls over on the side of the road, middle of the night or whatever, to pee. And when he does that, his dog busts out of the car, runs across the interstate. He goes running across the interstate with his dog to catch her. Both of them barely miss getting, flattened by, transfer trucks, by 18-wheelers. And he grabs her and wrestles her to the ground there in the median.
Okay.
Where these trees are and everything. And there's this description of it being almost Edenic. There's this reference to Noah's flood and to Gopherwood and everything. So here's this he's now in this literal borderland in this sort of antediluvian space, right?
I'm thinking of Jacob wrestling with the angel.
Yes, very much the same sort of thing, right? So, like, these spaces of in-betweenness where things happen.
Right.
That is, to me, really interesting because when I read Two-Step Devil, I kept trying to figure out, okay, are we in Alabama? Are we in Georgia? Are we in Tennessee? Like, and the slippage between all those.
Right.
And the slipperiness in between narratives and everything, that is a lot of what your work's going with. I really want to talk about that. So I'm really, really interested in that. We're kind of already on it then, so let's just kind of keep wrestling with that. I mentioned Sunbelt before. As an outsider to the South who now feels as if you are increasingly belonging to this place or trying to incorporate yourself into this place, what do you see? There's always been this worry amongst we Southerners, again, I'm a 12th generation Southerner, that this place is going to disappear. And you see that going back centuries. Always this fear of it disappearing, and yet somehow it still remains. With everything, all the demographic and all those kind of changes that are happening in South now, you, from your perspective, as someone who grew up in Arizona, was educated in California and New England and New Jersey, now living and working at the University of the South, as it proclaims, right?
Yes.
Do you see South still existing? Will it continue to exist, or is there going to be some sort of the long prophesied metamorphosis into Sunbelt? I mean, where is that going to happen? What do you see?
The Walmartization.
The Walmartization
of the South. Well, first
and
of
again,
all,
I love you say that because I look at my own people, my own kin, and so much of our own culture now is something that we just get because it's a lifestyle accessory that we go and buy and participate in.
Right.
And that's my own people. Right, that's people from my family.
Right.
We're participating in South as a lifestyle as much as any sorority girl fraternity guy from New Jersey who comes here to South Carolina does that same thing in a way.
I mean, the question I always have, I get this question, writing about the South, and I'm like, well, what is the South? Is there a South? Is it a singular thing? And I don't think it is. I think there are Souths.
I don't think there ever has been.
Like,
I think you're right. There's always been plurality. Yeah.
multiple Souths. I mean, Texas is a South that looks very much unlike Florida.
Absolutely.
As a South. And I think Florida itself as a state is like 5 Souths, and then apparently north starts again south of like
Orlando.
Naples Orlando. And so, I mean, I'm learning all of this, but I mean, I can be in South Alabama and then I can be in, Franklin, Tennessee, and really think these two topographies, these two cultures have very little to do with one another, other than that. If you go back to the Civil War, the south of the Mason-Dixon line, I mean, is that what we're talking about when we talk the South, this geographic region that was like, the seceded states? So I guess that would be my question for you is when you say South, what do you mean?
So I always define South, and I have, I'll get in fights with people on the internet about this. They'll say the South is like only these states and this line.
Right, right.
State borders don't really matter.
Okay.
Right, that's the first thing I say. I say if I'm going to give geographic borders, I'll give you my geographic definition, and then I'll tell you my cultural definition that leads to that geographic definition. Okay. My geographic definition is that the South is located south of the Potomac and Ohio rivers, terminates, its far western terminus is East Texas, the cotton fields of East Texas. Okay. Its northwestern terminus is the Ozarks. Okay. And then it ends in the south, to the south somewhere around Orlando. Right? What I say is that the South, and again, I know this is an imperfect answer because there's always going to be imperfect answers. The South is that place, that cultural region created by the mix of 3 cultures: the culture of southwestern England, the culture of the British borderlands, and the cultures, plural, of West Africa, that are brought into a melange here in that region I just specified under the aegis of Anglo-Saxon liberalism. Right, as its sort of norming political tradition, that over the course of the early 19th century found itself, because of political and economic exigencies, thinking of itself as a coherent place. Before about 1820, no one calls himself a Southerner. Right. It's only Jefferson at the very end of his life, only when he's in his mid-70s, right near the end of his life, starts thinking of himself as a Southerner, not a Virginian.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's like you never see him talk about himself as a Southerner until letters from the early 1820s.
That's fascinating.
He's always just a Virginian.
Just a Virginian, yeah.
And so it's really, kind of really after the Missouri Compromise where the politics and the economic exigencies lead to this sort of coherence there.
Okay.
Anyways, that's my little hobby horse on that.
And was slavery a part of, enslaved people?
Sure. I mean, of course, like they're a part of that. They're bringing that cultural stew too.
Right.
Like, you have these three different cultural elements to this cultural stew. And then you have a political tradition of Anglo-Saxon liberalism versus a sort of Puritan conservatism that you have in the Northeast, that again shapes not only the political culture, but also the really does shape the political culture and downstream of that, the social order as well. And so I say to people, it's like, well, so you've got the planters, you've got the yeomen and the poor whites, and you've got the enslaved blacks, and so you've got everything there, right? And then, of course, there's other complications. There's the Caribbean-facing aspect of all this, which is always present there. There was a Italian scholar back in the 70s who essentially argued the South was the westernmost part of the Mediterranean, right? And there's a logic to that, right? There is a logic to that. I've only read one of his books, and because most of his stuff has not been translated from Italian, which I don't have. But it's a pretty compelling case he makes there, right? This seigneurial civilization, as he calls it. Right?
So culturally, then, that's demographically and geographically, that's the boundaries. Culturally, you're asking about the past 20 years, like what are the changes, what is disappearing, what are the characteristics that you see as being threatened or as disappearing from the South, the traditions, or do you know what I'm asking? Because the thing that I would say that I have noticed from the time we arrived was that the parents had the Southern accent. My age, parents that were my age, parents of other children, their children did not.
And
the disappearance of the accent was a very real thing.
That thing itself, maybe this is me being the parent of 2 small children, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. that is, my daughter doesn't sound anything like me. And she sounds nothing like her grandparents.
Do you use media, television, Instagram, Reels, all of the things there?
I don't know. I don't. Because, she's not, she doesn't have a phone. And she watches TV, but most of the TV she watches is, she's really into sort of goofy 90s, like, superhero shows. Like, she's, like, really likes Power Rangers and, Powerpuff Girls and all that kind of, like,
Oh,
stuff.
Powerpuff Girls.
So she, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that. But she sounds nothing like me. And I know she's still mine. But there's something where Faulkner has this thing at the beginning of, in the prologue to his book, Big Woods, that you and I were talking about this morning, where he talks about the unalien. And I sometimes feel that, and maybe this is just sentimental nostalgia, but nostalgia is a real thing. It's a painful thing. I mean, in Greek, it's literally going home plus pain. That's really what it means, right? That's nostos plus algia, right? Going home plus pain, the pain of going home. I kind of see my daughter's lack of an accent being, well, lacking not an accent, but lacking how I speak and how I sound, as sort of a differentiation and a loss between she and I. Meanwhile, my son, interestingly, so the way I pronounce the word O-I-L.
Ol.
Ol. Now, when my children were learning phonics to learn how to read, they have that diphthong there. You pronounce it with 2 syllables.
Oil.
Oil, right? So foil, that kind of thing. My son, interestingly, I have noticed that when he encounters that when he's reading aloud, he will say it in the way that the phonics taught him, and then he will hypercorrect to pronounce it the way I do.
Do you think that that's the son wanting to be like a father?
I think maybe so. I think maybe so. And with my daughter, I don't know what sort of the psychology of it is. I just don't think maybe she notices these things. But my son, at least, he will hypercorrect to pronounce things the way I pronounce them. I just, I'm educated, whatever, but, I still, without thinking, use ain't. It's just because it's just how you speak, and it's a perfectly wonderful word. I also find my son, again, like intentionally reconstructing the grammar of his sentences to be able to drop it in at 7 years old. And maybe it's just an imitative parroting of how I speak, but it's like with my 2 children, whom I both love so much, I see this sort of attempt to navigate without even knowing that there's this sort of struggle of belonging and sort of the cultural shifts in South. They themselves are kind of playing the roles there in a really interesting way.
And it's like a microcosm of kind of what's happening, the homogenization of the South, and that there's, in their way, it's a very small example of a way that this is happening, and that they're trying to retain it through imitation. Or your son is anyway. And I had the opposite experience where, coming from Arizona, my oldest was 10, my youngest was 4 when we moved, and the youngest is the only one who did pick up an accent. So he wasn't trying to imitate the way we all sounded at home. He was more influenced by his friends at school. Sure. They went to Fairland Elementary, not Fairyland, spelled Fairyland, but it's pronounced Fairland. And
learning how to mispronounce words is one of the most important things you do in the South.
That's right. It's not Lafayette, it's Lafayette down in Georgia where we are. But yes, he... the other funny anecdote I'll tell you was SEC football, which I knew nothing about SEC football when we moved here. And all I know is after a week of school, my youngest gets in the car and says, "Mom, are we War Eagle or Roll Tide?" I said,
that's important.
I have no idea what that means. You'll need to ask your dad. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, I do think there is something being eroded and lost, and I've seen it in just 20 years of being here. There's something, but it was never mine. It was never something I was born and raised with. So it's really hard for me to come in and say, well, this is how the South has changed or is changing. I mean, everybody's mobile. The South has become more affordable than a lot of the places on the coastal areas. So I do. There's a great influx of people from like Austin and LA and all these places. So, by default, these cities that used to be small and kind of family based are exploding outward with people who are coming and opening restaurants and I think it's a good thing in a lot of ways. But I also get the nostalgia.
Does that give you source material to write with then?
Of the new folks coming in? No, actually, my next book is another story collection, and it's all Tucson stories.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm bucking the trend of the writer who starts out writing autobiographically and then kind of expands outward. I wrote 3 books set from places I wasn't from and about situations that I really was an outsider to, and now I'm coming back to kind of the most autobiographical material I've ever worked with. It's still stories, it's still fiction, but it's, really close to the bone.
Great. Well, let's talk about your habit of writing then. So I'm always interested in how writers write. Do you just write when you find? You mentioned before you just kind of wrote in secret when you found the time.
Yeah, back in those
while
days.
you were in graduate school. But now when you do it, do you have a sort of what's your routine? How do you write? How do you sit down and do that, or just as it comes, fits in, snatches here and there?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer that a lot of my writing friends have, which is they have a complete routine, a set routine. They get up at this time every day. This is their writing time, and then they go about the rest of their day. And it seems that's the writers I admire most. They seem to have that habit of writing. Mine is much more fits and starts. When I get into something, I descend into the well in the cave, and my family knows I disappear. And really have been helped by writing residencies at places like McDowell and Yaddo, where I can go for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they give you a studio and living quarters, and they feed you 3 meals a day, and you can really descend and get so much work done. So I rely a lot on that. But a typical day would be ideally getting up early, getting my coffee, having a little bit of quiet, and then starting as close to the dream state as I can. I have trained my husband that he's not allowed to talk to me in the mornings. No noise, no sound. Don't tell me your schedule. Don't he needs to quietly leave for work if I'm working, and if not, then
Great.
I'll give him a hug. But
Sure.
yeah. No, the mornings are great, and I write longhand. I draft longhand.
Oh, wonderful. Do you write in cursive or?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think I do.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention to it, and then I was with a young man at a writing festival, and I was taking notes. He leaned over, and it was a student, and he said, "Wow," he said, your handwriting looks like the founding fathers." I thought that was cute.
Pen or pencil?
Oh gosh, a pen.
Okay. So this is being in Tennessee. I want to just sort of speak about one of my obsessions.
Okay.
Which are fine. Well-crafted, fine American-made writing instruments.
Okay.
So you have one of the
Ooh, I'm gonna have to write
one
your
of the very few remaining American pencil factories right down the road from you.
Really?
In Murfreesboro, not Murfreesboro, Shelbyville. In Shelbyville.
Oh, in Shelbyville. Shelbyville.
Shelbyville is the Musgrave Pencil Company.
Okay.
In Shelbyville, Tennessee. They are an amazing, still family-owned company, producing high-quality American pencils.
Thank you for telling me.
I am almost a religious zealot about.
Is this one of them?
This is one of them. This is their sort of entry-level office pencil. But I have my favorite is their Harvest Professional Edition. Right. They also have a beautiful pencil called the Tennessee Red, which is made from Tennessee red cedar, and is a gorgeous, gorgeous writing instrument. So,
wow.
you're
like a wealth of information. Etymology, barbecue, pencils.
I'm just some stupid redneck. All right. I want to move into something more detailed then.
Okay.
This has all been fun and really interesting. Your work has a lot to do with religion. You talked about being Church of Christ growing up, but it also seems like you at some point or another had some sort of either formal or informal, very serious study of religion and religious traditions, right? Or you're really good at faking it, right?
It's the latter. Yeah.
Okay. So, where does what sort of religious traditions have you investigated, and what has your study of religion been like, even if it has been informal?
Yeah, it's very much informal. In fact, I have never taken a course in theology or a class in the Bible.
Okay.
But I did have an amazing professor at William and Mary, Adam Potke, and his wife Monica Potke. They were both professors there, and they taught a survey course of the Bible. And I'd always wished I could take it, and I didn't. But I did read his books, and particularly the Story of Joy, but he gets into the whole history of joy in the Bible and other sources too in literature. But really, it's just my own reading. But I mean, the interest in religion obviously comes from my background. So I was raised in this very Anabaptist tradition. It was pretty much body bad, soul good. Things of beauty bad, especially in worship, potential idolatry, sex bad, sex before marriage bad, dancing bad, drinking bad, but God good, spirit good. But the trouble for me was that God was something I had to make up in my head, whole cloth. I couldn't, there was nothing to grasp onto. You know, everything kind of beautiful and the iconography and the statues. I had Catholic cousins. That was idolatry. So when I was little, I grew up next door to an Episcopal, it was actually an Anglo-Catholic, what we'd say Episcopal church called St. Michael's and All Angels. And I would sneak into that church and to smell the incense and to see the statues in the stained glass. Like I developed an obsession with stained glass. And then in college, we stayed in the Church of Christ. And then in William and Mary, the Church of Christ, I don't remember what the problem was there for that, but we left the Church of Christ and started going to a Reformed Presbyterian church.
This was you and your husband. Okay.
And stayed in the kind of Reformed Presbyterian tradition for quite a while. And for me, that was like, wow, baptism of infants and liturgy and this, it felt completely
still
different.
No iconography, still no incense,
yes, right, but it was more liturgical, let's just say. But also more Calvinist, more emphasis on Calvinist kind of tradition. And then about, I'd say 4 years ago, after being at Sewanee and having attended, wept my way through Book of Common Prayer services and the Anglican order, and starting to read the Book of Common Prayer and doing the daily offices in the morning and the evening, and really being drawn to it, we started attending an Episcopal parish in Chattanooga, and so that's kind of where we've been now, where I've been in particular.
So no formal study of religion,
No.
just sort of an experiential study of it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I will say it is surprising, because as I'm reading your work, I'm thinking of St. Gregory Palamas. Are you familiar with St. Gregory Palamas?
So Gregory of Nyssa is the one that I've read.
St. Gregory Palamas. So this is one thing that this is like the big sort of ridiculous question I want to ask you.
Okay.
So I keep running into, when I see reviews of your work, I keep seeing these comparisons to Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah.
And I keep asking myself, is it because she's a woman writing about religious in a semi-Gothic South? And I keep saying, I think maybe that's it. Now, again, Flannery O'Connor's wonderful, but I think you're doing something different than she is, right? Flannery O'Connor's whole thing was like, hillbilly Thomism, right?
Right.
And okay, great, that's wonderful. But I don't think you're a hillbilly Thomist. What my understanding, and so the ridiculous phrase I came up with here was, again, back going to Sunbelt Palomism.
I'm going to have to see how that's even...
Sunbelt, so Palomism.
Gregory of Palma.
Yes, St. Gregory of Palamas.
Palamas.
Yeah, so St. Palamas.
Tell me about him.
So he was I'm not even going to guess what century he was in because I'll get it wrong. But he's the most significant theologian in the Eastern Orthodox tradition of the last 1,000 years or so. Okay. So his big contribution, and this is a big differentiation between Western and Eastern Christianity, is this thing called the apophatic method.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So you know about the apophatic method.
Yes.
So this is where I'm like, this must be, she must to be,
In Fire's sermon, they have this discourse about like apophatic literature and the negative, the via negativa, and
so, but this is, I read that, but then I see it other places in your work as well. There's this like struggling after God that is there in this sense that, not in the sort of sense that, maybe Church of Christ, you grew up, it's just the sort of warm feeling that you have there, but also, there's this quasi-Gnostic, I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but, you were saying, body bad, soul good, right?
Yes.
But, that kind of is contrary to the incarnation itself.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So, that is, this is, I grew up Southern Baptist, right? So, similar sort of thing. I'm Lutheran now, and, we're high incense and everything chanted.
Yeah.
Sort of thing now. But I also grew up Southern Baptist, and it was, I remember feeling a sort of similar thing. Right?
Yeah.
But Christianity is very, very earthy and crunchy too.
Absolutely.
And I think it has to be, if you really believe, as I believe, that God became a human being.
That's right.
The body cannot itself be
Right.
evil or bad, right?
That's right. The incarnation's sanctified matter forever.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. But getting to this, it seems like one thing you're struggling with is trying to figure out how to talk about God and how to talk about sin when we live in a world that treats both of those concepts kind of cheaply. Mm-hmm. There's things when I read your work as a professing Christian, there's things where I read your work sometimes, and I'm very uncomfortable with how close you get to blasphemy. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of unwind it in a way, too, that it's just like, it's this back and forth struggle with that there. And again, I keep going back to apophasis. The only thing we can say about God is what we cannot say.
Right.
Because he's so transcendently larger than we are. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, that's what she's doing. She's not writing, people, it's like she's not doing Flannery O'Connor's thing. Flannery O'Connor's doing her own thing, and it's wonderful. But you're doing something very, very different. Mm-hmm. So that's my sort of, I don't even know where that question is there, but I think maybe you kind of see where I'm going to.
No, I do. You said some interesting things. I mean, the blasphemy thing. So I always have to stop, especially with family members who read and say, now remember, these are characters.
Yes, of course.
Who are expressing blasphemous ideas. Very
and we
separate.
all feel those sometimes.
That's right. Yes, that's right. So I think it's extraordinarily important, especially as a writer of faith, to be able to write characters of no faith. Mm-hmm. It's important.
Absolutely.
We sing the story of God by singing of His absence. To kind of get back to the apophatic, I think maybe it is Flannery who said, you can't offer a cure to the sin without shouting the sin or without showing it. So I think there's too much of a rush with things that get segmented off to the side as Christian literature. There's too much of a rush to get to but what's the good news, what's the right thing to do? And I had a friend who read my first book in which the story Sinful, where a young man, 16-year-old, and a young girl have sex, and it doesn't go badly for them. There's no punishment or whatever. And she said, but they're happy, and it helped them, and it healed them. And she's like, it made me mad. That's not true. Premarital sex is wrong and all this stuff. So that's the kind of thing where I'm like, okay, if anybody's ever hand-tied by any of that, then I want nothing to do with that. That's not art anymore. If it's there just to give a moral lesson about anything. So absolutely not interested in that. But to ask what am I doing or what traditions or theology, I mean, as a writer, I really don't know what I'm doing. I mean, to me, that's sort of like the realm of the critics. All I know is I'm listening when I'm writing, and listening, I'm writing a sentence and hoping it sounds good, and then letting the sound of that sentence lead to the next one. And at some point, something has emerged, and I can begin to see how it can sound better, how I can make it less bad. Mm-hmm. But it's aesthetic. It's an aesthetic process first, and the meaning. Getting back to your opening comments about Ladies and Gentlemen of the Pavement, the meaning of that story, if any meaning is there, it comes up through the sound and through the poetry of what I'm doing, and through the material, through the body and the bodies of the characters. So I've heard people say, well, that story is about the intersection of sexuality and the sacred. Some people say, no, that story is about weight loss. Some people say, oh, that story is about the domination of the South, and the South being oppressed by these kind of old traditions and trying to escape the old traditions into the new. And every time someone tells me what that story is about, I say, yes, that's exactly what it's about. Because really what you read is a co-creation between you and me. Yeah. You read a totally different Two-Step Devil than I wrote. Yeah. So whatever you saw in it, I'm still going to have to write down your phrase. Yeah.
Sunbelt Polemism.
Polemism is exactly my answer to you is yes. That's exactly what I meant to do.
That is wonderful.
But your brain engaging with my work is a really special thing. So I would love to talk more about this Sunbelt Polemism.
Wonderful. Yeah. Kind of coming out of that, you got this one moment in Fire Sermon. And you and I were talking about this at breakfast. So I'm just going to read the quote if you don't mind.
Sure.
So in Fire Sermon, if all listeners haven't read that novel, and you should, it is a novel about a woman who's had an affair and is trying to deal with her feelings about that affair. Really moving novel. I felt so much sensitivity towards Maggie and also so much fury to her as well, right? The most disturbing thing about that novel, though, is how, to me, it made me face my own shortcomings and made me understand my wife differently.
Really?
It was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
It was really kind of disturbing in how it kind of peeled back things about my own self too.
That's the dream. That's
yeah,
the goal. Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you.
So, but there's this moment in it where she's trying to deal with this, and her own understanding of her faith, and how this is in the background of all this. And there's this short paragraph that appears twice in the novel, once about halfway through, and then another about 85% of the way through. And it reads as following. What if you woke one day to discover the corpse of Christ had been identified definitively, or that an irrefutable, airtight scientific study had been devised to disprove the existence of God, and the study had, beyond any conceivable doubt, proved he did not exist? What would you feel? The first time this is done, about halfway through the novel, the narrator's mental response is relief. And the second time, about 85% of the way through the novel, her response to the exact same question is despair. And this is getting to something else in your fiction. There's this sort of sense of dualism, always talking to each other, that is always there. Within the characters themselves, this constant conversation, this conversation outside of themselves too. I really find interesting. You mentioned this morning that Maggie, the character in Fire Sermon, it seems as if she's speaking to, she's talking to herself, she's talking to a therapist, she's talking to God. I also found myself asking sometimes if she's talking to the devil. They all kind of seem to be plausible answers to me.
Interesting.
And maybe it was because I had Two-Step Devil in the back of my brain, right? Because I'd read that first, where there is a conversation between the prophet and the devil.
Yes.
And this it's really moving moment in the sort of play that you put in that you said your editor hated.
Well, so she hated the first iteration,
Okay.
which was a 40-page rant. By the time we got it to a play, she was like, she just wanted it a little shorter. Okay. I could talk about going all the different iterations that devil section went through at some point, but continue with your question.
So how are you playing with this sort of dualism, these kind of different answers that are there? And even without giving anything away, there's essentially two different endings to Two-Step Devil, right? There's one ending where this happens and one ending where it doesn't happen. And that's all I'm going to say without giving anything away, right?
Sort of. So
yeah.
So there's a real ending and a hypothetical ending.
Yes.
There's the real ending is it definitely lands one way, which is I had to have it end that way to be true to the survivors of actual sex trafficking. The other one is a visionary ending.
Yes.
Because I really wanted to implicate the reader into the realm of the visionary.
Yes.
That the prophet's been having these
Yes,
visions.
yes.
Yeah. So right. But yeah. So the doubling. Well, I can answer it in the context of Maggie, the character Maggie. The first time the question arises is when she's in the throes of this illicit affair and is very much enjoying it and doesn't want it to have to stop because of any religious belief or any commitment that she has made to these vows and to God. It's like, let me just have my sin, So if Christ was proved to be dead and there was no God, that was the only kind of stricture against what she was doing. So of course it would be relief because then she wouldn't have to stop this. There would be no moral compass for that. The second time is after everything's fallen apart and the affair is at its end and she's trying to rebuild a life and recognizes her need. Right, recognizes her need for help, and specifically for God's help and for forgiveness, and understands repentance, I think, and so the despair is like, actually, I need this. Like I'm in the human condition of need, and I need Jesus. So I would be despairing if that was a myth, because that's all I have. so I think there was an important twist, and that was a new addition to repeat that. It was just something, again, sonically. It just felt like at that stage in the novel, there needed a beat, there needed a white space, there needed some kind of opening in that particular locus of the novel. And so that's usually where these things come from: structural need or sonic need or cadence need. It's never thematic need at first.
Okay.
It's always in the editing stage later when those things come up. The play, the conversation between. And to answer your question, is Maggie talking to herself, to a therapist, or it's not the devil? My intent, I almost hate to speak that word aloud because I don't think intent matters. I think reader interpretation matters. But in this case, I will say, in the very final conversation that Maggie has with the voice she's talking to, she finally says, "Who are you?" Mm-hmm. And the voice says, "I am the voice of one behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it,'" which is an Old Testament reference, and it's quoting God. So I think I did intend it to be her prayers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
but I think if your interpretation was it was a therapist or she was just having a self-dialogue, it's also valid. Yeah. The two-step characters. So I know we haven't really talked about the plot much of this novel, but it's focused on an old man. He's dying. He's a visionary outsider artist. He believes that there's a great apocalypse coming and he needs to warn the president. He rescues a young sex trafficking victim because he thinks she's an angel sent from God to take these visions to the White House. Meanwhile, there is a cowboy boot, bolo tie wearing devil, Two-Step, who he nicknames Two-Step Devil, who kind of taunts him. And in the first part, the prophet's point of view part of the novel, this devil figure speaks in his vernacular. Mm-hmm. He says, "You done gone and ruined her." That way of speaking, which so you might think, oh, it's the prophet is imagining
his own.
Yes, it's in his head. But kind of in the third section, when Two-Step takes over the narrative. And by the way, the reason I knew I needed the devil is I needed a Trinity. I knew I was mapping onto the Trinity in a sort of subversive way, and I just couldn't have these two voices. And also it's called Two-Step Devil. Yeah. He had to show up. But when he shows up, then he's like this educated gentleman, who's much maligned and only wishes to justify his ways to the human race. And he's inspired in that section, I think, Dostoevsky's and the Brothers Karamazov. Mm-hmm. There's the Ivan's Nightmare chapter where the slightly shabby Russian gentleman shows up, and he looks sophisticated, but don't look too closely. His clothes are just slightly out of date, and he's like, I really love humans. I wish I could be one of them. I wish I could, I would like to be a 200-pound merchant's wife and go light a candle in a church somewhere. I wish I could eat. So I think it was that kind of a devil figure, and kind of lapses into French every now and then, and that I was twinning that, I think, the vernacular voice that would show up in the prophets section, and then the devil in the play, which is a very highly educated, theologically invested voice.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's really given me a lot to think about, and wanted to revisit some of these things and investigate them more with all that in mind. I have two questions left.
Okay.
One I'm going to save an easy outro question for the end, but I got one more sort of big question. One thing that your work has me thinking about in a variety of ways is what the nature of love is.
Okay.
In this sort of sonic experimentation that leads you to ideas, what have you come to understand the nature of love as?
That is not an easy question. The nature of love. Gosh, I wish I had a succinct, brilliant answer that I could just spit out.
You asked me about the South.
I know. What is the South? You're like, okay, Jamie, lob it back. What is love?
Because you have it in so many different ways throughout your fiction. There's illicit love. There's the beautiful, there's marital love. There's the love that the prophet has for this. Like it's a wonderful one. Even her name Michael with this echo of David's second wife, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much there. So.
Yeah, I think there's something actually that Two-Step says toward the end of the book about kindness, and about the good and evil being interdependent, but get away from that like cosmic struggle and just look at the kindness. You forget about the kindness. And I don't know what love is, but I see it in kindness, in acts of kindness and generosity and self-sacrifice and all of the things we think of as, in the Christian language, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy and peace, and all of the. I know whatever it is, we're lacking in it desperately in our country right now. And I do know that if I'm not feeling love for my characters as I'm writing them and revising them, that it's wrong.
So you fall in love with them.
I have to feel a measure of love for every character, even the completely rotten ones.
Yeah.
Because that's just life. If we stop seeing somebody as having any redeemable or any lovable quality somewhere in them, then we kind of like leave a little warp on our soul, I think, and the ability to love. I think it's Thomas Merton that talks about that every human has a virgin point. It's an untouchable point within to each of us that no matter what we've done, no matter what anybody else has said, that remains God's point that cannot be touched by evil, and that to try to dig through whatever it is we have to dig through to still locate that virgin point, that point of God in each soul.
What is it? Dostoevsky says something like, "There's a war going on between God and man, and the battlefield is the soul of every human," something like that. But there's a war going on between God and the devil, and the battlefield is the soul of every human, something like that. Right?
Yeah. Well, we're so polarized in our country right now. We're just looking for the ways, like, these people are the bad people. These people are the bad people. Sure. And this country and it's just the schism it's just mind blowing. Like, we're humans. We're humans. We're all we've got to figure out a way. Yeah. I don't know what the answer is.
Final question.
Okay.
An easy question then. What are you reading these days?
Oh, well, we did talk about
some of this.
One book that I recently finished it's called On the Calculation of Volume. It's the writer's name is Solveig Balje, but I'm not sure if that's the correct way to pronounce it.
It's Danish.
I do have a source to ask. My friend Sam Harvey interviewed her recently, so I'll have to ask her. I mean, if you haven't read Sam Harvey's Booker-winning book Orbital, it's an absolute poetic masterpiece. That's one. And then I'm on a James Baldwin jag right now, actually. So I recently reread, in fact, 2 weeks ago, reread Giovanni's Room.
Oh, yeah. It's been years I read that.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. And then I brought with me on this trip Go Tell It on the Mountain. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the middle section where he's kind of left the perspective of the young man, and he's now in the prayers. It's Florence's prayer, and then the mother's prayer, and then the father's prayer. And it's structurally really interesting what Baldwin is doing with that book is first. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I find Baldwin endlessly inspiring and poetic, and I want to have his words in my head
he's
at all times.
He's a magnificent prose stylist.
Yeah,
he really
he is.
Well, Jamie, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed talking with you on this, and I really look forward to hearing you speak tonight.
Thank you.
And so glad we brought you here. Again, our NYFER 2025 NYFER honoree this year is Jamie Quatro, the author of Two-Step Devil, Fire Sermon, and I Want to Show You More, and a forthcoming book of short stories. Do we have a title yet? Can we reveal it yet?
We have a title that my publisher loves, but I don't love it, and I haven't fought yet. But I'm just calling it Tucson.
Okay, very
Tucson
good.
Stories.
Very good. Very good. And that will be coming out next year?
2027.
Fantastic.
It's due in April.
Okay, well, you got to finish. Finish.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to that, and look forward to hearing you talk tonight.
Thank you, Matt. It's really good to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show.